Honorable Minister, distinguished guests on the dais, friends. It's a fact that there are regulatory challenges. These challenges actually have also emerged. Some of them are man-made in the sense that we have created systems which are very complex and complicated. There have been problems with regard to certain laws like the Land Acquisition Act, which is creating a problem in terms of how to acquire land for infrastructure projects. The issue here is, when should the project be bid out? The problems should be seen in three parts. The first part is the problems that are before bidding, in which the private sector is not a party. That is the time when the sponsoring authority, whether it is an NHAI or ports or airports authority, when they are conceptualizing a project and they are looking for the requirements of statutory clearances, at that point of time, how much time it takes. It does not concern the private sector, but it does concern the government, because we would want infrastructure to be developed quickly, because it adds to the means for creating economic wealth in the country. But at the time of the bidding of the project, the regulatory overhang happens if the project, and as rightly Abhay has said, if the project has not been properly or fully conceived. I would not agree fully with the fact that the projects are identified what we call, within inverted commas, politically, or because of political considerations. So what we can certainly say is whether a project is fit for the private sector or not. Or it is not very correct to say that projects are not well conceived because they are politically identified. I think that impression should be corrected. But the viability gap funding scheme was put in place only for this purpose, to say that if there is a criticality in a project which would be economically very critical for the government or the country, but may not be commercially viable, then how do we make it commercially viable to attract the private sector? That is why the viability gap funding scheme has been put in place. It has now been emulated by very large number of countries all over the world. It is treated as one of the best practices in PPPs, and it has been working fairly well. So, first part, when the bid takes place, why is it that after viability gap funding has been resorted to, the projects run into problems? One part, in some manners, because of the urgency or because of the need to move faster, we have actually bid out projects which were not fully developed, which means land acquisition, for instance, had not been fully completed, the land had not been taken in hand, and therefore there was a problem. This problem is more in the case of linear projects. Roads, for instance, because if you have a 100-kilometer stretch, you may have 90 kilometers of road which is in hand, but 10 kilometers of stretch and differently may not have been acquired or may get into litigation, and that causes a problem. But in case of standalone infrastructure projects, that is not the case, because when a project is bid out, the land is actually fully in hand. So the other problem that arises, apart from land acquisition, are other statutory clearances, and there has been a problem with that. The second problem that has been spoken of is in terms of the bidding process. And bidding process is robust in India. I don't think we have a problem with the bidding process of PPPs. We must make a distinction between PPPs and other projects. I'm only speaking of PPPs. There's a robust bidding process. But the problem in bidding is not in terms of the process. The problem in the bidding which is coming is on account of very aggressive bidding by the private sector. In case after case, we have seen where the projects are now running into trouble. I think the private sector overestimated their capacity, and they overestimated the capacity of the project to pay back. So there was, and I'm not blaming anyone for it, because there is a learning curve. We have been into the PPP practice for just about 20 years, whereas other countries who have been there for 30, 35, 40 years have also run into these kind of problems because of not being able to really assess the potential of a project on a 30-year basis or 25-year basis. So there is an issue on that. And therefore, I think as much as the capacity in the government is necessary and needed, and I do think it is inadequate and we need to work on it, I equally believe there is a need for capacity building in the private sector. One other part which I think is very important for us to remember is this issue of renegotiation, which also has come up in this report, that we need to, it's a dirty word, but we need to do it. I'd ask my officers to examine world over how renegotiations are done. Very surprisingly, and after very great hard work, we discovered that renegotiations have only been done of contracts largely in Latin American countries. And these renegotiations have all been questioned. They've all been questioned. So there isn't much literature or experience world over to show that ab initio, while writing contracts, renegotiation clause has been put in any contract anywhere. We haven't seen it. So I would certainly wish to be educated on this if this information is available. In my mind, what we need to do is to have a more sophisticated PPP framework, which we are working on now, which means a framework which looks at PPPs in a manner where there is flexibility to factor in the changes in the circumstances which run over a period of 25 years or 30 years. Nobody can foresee them. We were not able to foresee the future, which was 5 years hence. So in 2008, when the economy was running at 9%, we thought this will never end. That for the next 30 years, we will grow at 9%. And 3 years down the line, the economy started slowing down. Last year, we ended up 4.7%. Obviously, this was nobody foresaw this. So we'll need to have this. We'll need to factor this in. We'll have to make some more sophisticated, mechanism for this. Also, sophisticated design of PPPs. The question whether PPPs are no longer relevant is answered in this manner. PPPs today are more relevant than they ever were. And the reason for that is the government also, the new government has a vision for creating a completely new paradigm for infrastructure in the country, starting with 100 smart cities, for instance, which the Prime Minister has spoken of. Now, all this would require large mobilization of private investment, but even more than private investment, private managerial skills, of private management. And I think marrying private money and management with government's determination to have infrastructure in place, I think is a very potent force. And I think the results we will be able to see not too distant in the future if we do the things right. And from this podium, I would like to assure you that as far as the government is concerned, we intend to do it right, and we will do it right. Thank you.